Welcome along to another episode of the Make Life Work podcast, the home edition, with me, Cy Jobling. This series, I'm talking to people from around the tech scene about how they're coping through the COVID-19 lockdown and trying to find a balance with any work, side projects and personal demands. This week, I've invited along Alex Brooke for a little chat on how she's been getting on with the lockdown. Alex is Senior Product Designer at UK food delivery giant Deliveroo. I've mostly known Alex through Twitter, regularly comparing notes across the London tech scene, but also with a shared passion for beautiful design and public speaking. I've long admired Alex's work and openness about her own well-being, so I invited her along for a chat on the podcast, which she has thankfully accepted. Let's see how she really feels about it once we've got into it. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, all good. Nice sunny day today, which is nice. A bit warm, but yeah, it does help.
It does help. So whereabouts are you living at the moment, without giving away too much detail?
Yes, I'm in London at the moment. I've been back and forth from Essex and London. I went to stay back in Essex for the lockdown, but I've been in London since they kind of lifted the driving restrictions. So back here now, which is nice.
So your family are from Essex, I gather?
Yes, yeah, they're from Essex, sort of countryside-y, which is quite a nice change from London sometimes. So go back, a bit of fresh air.
What do you prefer then? Because obviously you've got the mix of those different lifestyles. It's I live both. I know.
Yeah, I like both. That's why I kind of originally wanted to work in London, because I like the buzz of the city, but then I do like the countryside sometimes. So I quite like to be able to go back and forth a little bit and not be in London for too long.
It's true.
Yeah, city life gets a bit too hectic sometimes, I think.
I think during this mode, it's nice to get away from it. But
Yeah.
then you realise the benefits of being in a city in this mode as well, like deliveries, for example.
Yeah. I think that's the thing I missed when I was in Essex is you can't get food delivery, and you can't get, not to plug the company I work for or anything, but you can't get a delivery and you can't get kind of food quickly, where my parents live. So you had to always plan when you want to get dinner or whatever. Whereas here you can just order food straight away. I think that's my main thing. Everything else you can sort of get in Essex, Amazon deliveries and stuff like that, but food, you have to plan.
Yeah.
And food's a big part of my life, so.
Well, you made a point there, actually. You don't really want to plug where you work, but you know this industry quite well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Deliveroo?
Yeah, so I'm a senior product designer at Deliveroo, and I work on kind of the restaurants and rider side of things. So obviously it's a three-sided marketplace, but I kind of focus on designing stuff for riders and restaurants. But obviously all three sides kind of coincide a lot. So it's quite an interesting environment to sort of work with, really.
Are they based in London as well?
Yeah, so our offices are in London, but we've got offices kind of in other countries, and we are an international company, but we're kind of mainly based in London.
Okay, so you're like the hub of it, I guess, and then it'll kind of satellites out into other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you find, just to kind of delve into the practicalities of what you do, you're a UX designer. Do you work within teams or do you kind of work across teams? How does it sort of work for you?
So at the moment, I'm sort of working across teams. So I work within them for short amounts of time within a project, but then I'll sort of shift around teams. So sometimes I might be working on a project that's kind of focused on improving the experience for riders, and sometimes I might be working on something helping restaurants. So it's quite nice to be able to sort of jump between them and sort of have a bit of a broad focus and kind of know the scene quite well. So yeah, it's quite nice.
Do you like the fact that you're not sat within a permanent team though? Because I know a lot of engineers do in a way.
Yeah, I've worked that way before. I've worked both ways, where I've either been embedded in a team the whole time and not worked on anything else and just been solely focused on that one thing. But then some places I've worked kind of more like this, where I've kind of jumped around projects when needed. I do like both. Sometimes I think it's nice to be embedded in a team and really be able to sort of be invested in that team permanently. Then sometimes I do think it's nice, I'm someone that likes to broaden my knowledge out quite a lot and kind of be able to help other people to sort of join the dots a bit. And I think if you're working across different teams, it's quite nice to be able to be that person who joins the dots between other people's knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So I guess in your sort of role, you've got this general view anyway, and then you kind of hone in into a specialism and kind of go, right, let's solve this problem using all these
Yeah,
best practice we know of.
yeah, exactly.
So I gather you're quite involved in like the style guides approach to development and style design systems.
Yeah, so we actually have a team that's sort of like dedicated to kind of improving the design system. So we've got like a design ops team,
Ooh.
and we work with them to make sure. So if I'm as a product designer, I'm working on a project and I need a new component, I'll design the component and then work with them to make sure it's not something that already exists, and make sure that like it's something we could introduce and so on. So we sort of have this team that helps us to align all of our design components together, which is quite nice to have as a resource, I think, as a designer, because it's not your sole responsibility to sort of have to like try and group everyone together to make sure the components are coming together. I've had that at other places I've worked where I've sort of had to be the person to sort of try and get everyone to be consistent and so on. And it's quite nice to have someone sort of dedicated to that role to make sure everyone's designing in the right way and not introducing kind of inconsistencies to the library, etc.
Yeah, I've seen it personally in a few companies actually that
Yeah,
it's very difficult to coordinate that
yeah,
piece, that design ops piece that you've got a team for.
very.
Um, but obviously you've got into a better place where you are now. It's not as difficult.
Yeah, it's like I said, I've seen it from both sides. So I think it's like quite nice to have that team there. But then equally, I have had to be that person before who's had to try and coordinate everyone as well as doing project work and stuff like that. So I think it is nice to kind of have a bit of experience on both sides. I think so you sort of know what goes into it, and sometimes
Mm.
why if you've designed something and you sort of agree, okay, maybe this component already exists in a similar form, do we actually need to introduce a new component for this, or can we just tweak the existing one a little bit? So
Mm,
yeah, it's quite nice to sort of have that sole team to help us get it consistent.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
So did you talk about previously as well? Where else have you worked doing your designy role?
Quite a few places. I was telling someone the other day, and I was like, I've actually worked more places than I sort of thought I had. So I worked at Barclays before Deliveroo for about a year. And obviously, that's a very big organisation and quite a different way of working as a designer, I would say.
Mm.
And then before that, I worked at Debenhams for about 3.5 years, actually, quite a long time. So I kind of worked there initially as a UI designer, and then started to move on and led like the UI design team, and then moved on to lead the UX team for a little while. And then before that, I ran my own business for about a year, freelancing. And then before that, I worked at a bunch of agencies. So I've kind of worked across like quite a broad spectrum of places now.
You have,
Um,
yeah. So you started off working in agencies, freelance for yourself for a while, then went into the big places, basically.
yeah, yeah, exactly that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So obviously in the agency life, how did you find that? Because I know a lot of people really find it difficult.
Yeah, it's a very different way of working to working in house, because you obviously don't like you work with a core team like most of the time, but then you're working with different clients all the time. So you're getting different client needs coming in and different personalities, and it's quite hard to sort of like find something that works. I found for like every single client, like you have to adjust your approach a lot. Whereas when you're working in house, you sort of get to know the team a lot better,
Mm.
and you know the people, and you can sort of adjust your design approach to suit the team as well as the needs of the business, so you kind of get to know it a lot better. You work in house, right? So you
I
probably
do.
found that as well.
Yeah, I've always worked in house. That's why I'm always curious how people find agency life and freelance because I've been tempted by freelancing, but
Mm.
lacked the braveness, I think, of taking the plunge.
Yeah, it was good. It was good fun freelancing for a year. Like I like to have the freedom of doing the project work that I really like felt like was adding some sort of value or I really enjoyed. But the thing I missed about it was like having a team around you all the time and like getting to know the people in that team. Because I think like for me that's a big part of like work. Like I like to have friends at work and colleagues that I get on with.
Mm.
So freelancing for myself was a little bit, at times, it just felt a little bit like isolating almost, even though I was working with people all the time. You just weren't working with a consistent set of people.
It's difficult. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's what's also kept me in-house for a lot of the time. I like
Mm.
bouncing ideas off people and validating things with people, but I just
Yeah,
like
same.
interacting as well. Like this, I can't stand living in isolation so long. And I have
No.
noticed those people that are quite successful in freelancing tend to have like a partner in crime that they work with a lot,
Mm.
not all the time, but a lot of the time. So I think that helps. But
Yeah.
obviously, you tried it and then went, Yeah, Debenhams sounds quite nice.
Yeah, at the time, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
what sort of stuff were you doing then? Because obviously that's the start of your career journey, I guess, to go into where you are now.
Yeah. I was doing a lot of at the time, well, I sort of started off in the world of design more as like a front end developer almost, like just doing
Right.
HTML, CSS and building kind of quite basic websites. And on the side I sort of designed a little bit around that. So my first job was more kind of like focused on doing a little bit of UI design, but actually developing a bunch of stuff that either I designed or someone else had designed. So and that's where I started working with like different clients and started to get to see, you know, what clients were requesting. And I sort of naturally started to do a little bit more design work around that as well. So I think my first job was like quite a nice way to get into it, really, because it just sort of like naturally made me start to learn how to design
Mm.
and how to deal with clients. And I learned a lot from the people I worked with in my first job. And then my second job was again like agency based, but we worked on a lot of like experiential campaigns in like bus stops and train stations and random things like that, like that companies ran. But we also did a lot of I don't know if you remember like the tabs that Facebook used to have that were like pages where companies used to run competitions.
Yep.
And we used to design loads of those,
Right.
which meant I had to work within a lot of like brand guidelines. And I started to talk to big brands about like, oh, can we use this in your guidelines and can we change this and so on. And I think that was like sort of like a nice early way into like design systems almost for me, like just to sort of start to see how brands articulated their guidelines and how they wanted you to use them in the pages. Like it just started me thinking about how you would, you know, start to articulate those in a design.
Mm.
And that was before the days kind of where design systems were more, you know, well used and so on. So I think it was quite a nice like way into that for me. So I sort of started a bit more in development and then UI design. And then as I worked at Debenhams, my role started to need more, you know, more other things come into it. And also when I freelanced, because I was like I was working on my own, I did kind of the full range of product design. So I did the designs and helped do the research and I worked with the engineers. So I started doing kind of the more broader spectrum design then. And then as I moved on to Debenhams, it sort of like continued. And then I've kind of gone into more of a sort of product designer from there, I guess.
Nice. I mean, I like the fact you started coding a lot. That I mean,
yeah, I can't remember how to do it now.
okay, so you've moved on from those days. You're like, yeah, I like the idea of this, but no, I need to move on.
Yeah, I do really like the coding side, but I don't think I'm patient enough for it. Like I can do it. Like every time if I need to update my portfolio, I coded it myself, so I have to remember how to code every time I do it. And the fact that I did start off that way, I think it does help when working with engineers as well, because obviously you know sort of the basics and kind of the principles that go into coding. So it helps a lot with conversations with engineers. So yeah, I definitely don't code much anymore, but I know the principles still.
It's good. I mean, it gives you that empathetic bone as well to kind of understand how they might
Yeah.
approach it. I'm like you. I used to code front end stuff all the time.
Oh, nice.
And then as I went into more leadership roles and sort of delivery side of things, I could sense the BS between the conversations. I can go, you could sugar glaze this,
Yeah.
or you could just get something done. And they're like, I want to
Yeah.
refactor the whole thing. No, you don't. It works. We can
Yeah.
hack away all the time. But I think it gives you that, yeah, it gives you that layer of understanding, I guess.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like if there is something that genuinely like an engineer can't achieve in the deadline, it helps you like be able to empathize with that a bit more as well and come up with a solution together of something that might work. Whereas I think if I didn't have that understanding, it would make it a lot harder if an engineer was going to me, oh, this design is going to take me like 3 days to code, and I'd be like, why? Like I don't understand. But I think having that background just helps you be able to empathize with them as well and be able to sort of work through things together.
I like how you mentioned that you'd come up with a solution together as well. I mean, that's the thing. That's definitely a skill that is required in a lot of people. Right? Just going, can't do it. I need more time. You're like, come on, we haven't got time. It costs us money. This does.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked a lot about your work, and I'm mindful of time because we could be talking about this forever. What else do you do beyond, like, making websites?
So I obviously do that most of the time, but and at the moment there's not as much option to do other things. But I have been doing a lot of like baking. I'm quite an avid baker. In all the jobs I've worked in, I've generally become known as the person who bakes and brings cakes in all the time and gets requests for cake. So I'm quite a avid baker. And aside from that, like I like cycling and things like that.
Oh, good.
So I try and balance out the cake sometimes with going for a nice cycle.
It's nice that you got an opportunity to burn off all those
Yeah.
calories. It's like, well, right, now I need to do 35k to
Yeah,
make use of
exactly.
that. How are you finding that in London, though? Are you doing it? Are you managing to get out much around London for cycling, or are you?
Not so much since this lockdown. Like before the lockdown, I was doing more cycling around London. I live in not such a busy part of London, so it's quite nice to be able to go for a cycle. Like I can go along like near the Thames and stuff like that, so it's quite nice. And there's a lot of cycle paths like near me, so I can sort of go out round those rather than having to go on all the busy roads. But I do miss like being able to cycle on Essex roads. I used to do a lot more like quiet countryside cycling, which I really liked. But obviously that's a lot harder when you're in London.
Oh, absolutely. I've got a friend who lives in London as well, and he's loving the fact that the streets are so quiet, and he'll go
Yeah,
running like at the weekend around Westminster. It's absolutely eerily quiet, but wonderful for health.
yeah. Looks so nice. I've seen other people doing that as well. I've not made it into central London since this, but I've seen people like going into central London. Like you say, it's just like ghost town, and that must be so nice.
In a way, yeah, but I think it sounds like you're being a lot more sensible about this. I don't want to go too contentious with the politics around this, but it feels like you are being a bit more protective of yourself rather than just going whatever.
Yeah, well, I've got asthma, so
Right.
I'm not really high risk, but equally like I know it affects the asthma like sufferers a bit more. So I'm just sort
Ah,
of like I want to try and just be a little bit more careful and just stay in if I can. But I found the time's gone really fast. It's a bit like Groundhog Day where the time just seems to fly by.
it is weird how fast these days are going. But I've realised I've been at home for 12 weeks this week,
Yeah, same.
and I've never known anything like it. It is strange, but luckily having work, it helps find the weekends because a lot of people are really struggling to go. What days?
Yeah.
How are you finding that?
Yeah, I think like you say, I think if I didn't have work, I think I would find it a lot harder to know like when the weekend is and like know like when to relax a little bit. Whereas obviously in the week you can sort of put your focus into doing your work and so on, and then you've got the weekend to rest like you would normally. So I think it does give you a little bit more normality in this weird time.
Mm,
And I've just been feeling like I've been doing a lot more cooking in the evenings. Like in the time I'd normally be commuting, I've been cooking like a nice meal. So I think it's made me like do more things like that I wouldn't normally do. Like normally I would go to work, go to an exercise class, travel home, eat a quick dinner, and then it's like the next day again before you know it. So you don't really get much time to do stuff like that. So now I've sort of been able to do a lot more cooking and baking, and which is good in some ways, but not good in other ways.
well, I feel like
Yeah.
it's mental well-being, though, isn't it? I find the same. It's been nice to
Yeah,
be at home with my family around, actually having dinner at dinner time,
yeah,
not at nine
exactly,
thirty or whatever time it is
exactly.
when you get home, but also having the luxury of going, let's cook something rather
Yeah,
than throw something together. So
yeah,
there's definitely a fine balance, but yeah, I think we're
definitely.
all in this boat. How
Yeah.
about I mean, you mentioned like your well-being a little bit, and how have you been over the last kind of 12 weeks? Has there been any significant challenges you've had to work through?
So I've been okay. We've had a lot of various things going on work-wise and family-wise.
Mm,
We had unfortunately like a bereavement in the family from coronavirus,
sorry
which
to hear that.
really sucked.
Yeah.
But luckily I was at home at the time, and I think like you said just now, like kind of being around family, like that helped a lot. I think we had a lot of time together that we wouldn't have normally have had
Mm,
together in an instance like that. Like normally, like if a bereavement happened, like I might be in London and my family might be in Essex, and I'd have to travel back, but might only be able to go back for a few days or something. But I was around them like the whole time, which was horrible, but in some ways lovely to be able to spend that time with my family and sort of be able to go through it all together.
mm,
But yeah, we've had a lot going on. That's what I'll say. In various in various ways.
yeah.
But I'm doing okay. I think, like I said, getting through it. Like I think work helps a lot, and having something consistent there to do helps a lot, and having things like you enjoy outside of work, and also not being too hard on yourself as well. I found, 'cause I think sometimes it can be quite easy because you're going through all these things, and I'm sure everyone's going through something or the other at the moment, whether it's just like kind of struggling with being at home all the time or like not seeing your friends that much, and stuff like that, or whether it's something like we've had like a family bereavement or something like that. Like everyone's got something, like whether it's the same issue or not. And I think it can be quite easy. Like some days you might have a really super productive day and you get loads done. And then some days you might have a day where you kind of just feel like you can't get much done. And I think I've found not beating yourself up on those days when that happens, like, is a big thing. And making sure you recognize that everyone is having days like that. It's not just you, sort of thing.
You're quite vocal about these things, though, aren't you? Generally, you don't hold back, not in a bad way, but you're pretty open. If there's something that's pretty significant, you're like, you know what, I'm going to voice this. I feel like I need to get it off my chest, and I've done it recently myself. We had family situation last week. It wasn't as bad as what you've been through, but it really threw me off for the rest of the day, and I couldn't concentrate. I just went into video, as we do every day, Zoom calls, endlessly all day. So just sit there quietly this afternoon. But I found by outletting on Twitter about it, I got some amazing responses, and it really made me feel like actually people care,
Definitely.
for one, and perspective. Everyone's got their own challenges at the moment, so it could have been a lot worse, let's say. So it sounds like you've been through the ropes a little bit, but you're coping well.
Yeah, I think, like you say, I think sometimes, like, I see a lot on social media, like especially when you go on Instagram and things like that, where people are always posting like the good sides of their life, and I've seen a lot of stuff being written about, people like being unhappy because they think everyone else's lives are perfect through social media. So I do think it is quite important for certain things to sort of be a little bit vocal about it if you can be, and sort of show the fact that, like I say, a lot of people I've spoken to recently are going through something at the moment, and not everyone might be so vocal about it. And I think sometimes it can make you feel like it is only you going through that thing, when actually a lot of people are going through that thing. So I think at times it is quite important to be a little bit vocal about what's going on, and sort of, so people, if they're going through that as well, they realize they're not the only ones going through that too.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, to be honest. I think you've got to be careful how much you put out there. And there is a natural sugar glaze of what people put out there naturally. It feels like, just apply the filter to it. No one's going to notice it's all crap. But I'm actually reading a book at the moment called Logging Off. It's a bit of a trashy novel sort of thing, but it's the idea that this chap is obsessed with the internet. He's online all the time with his phone, whatever it is. And then he really suffers. He has like almost a mini stroke. Like, it's like the doctors suggest you're online too much. This is bad for your health. Turn off. And it's going through the whole scenario of, not everyone's stories are great out there, by the way. And stop being so angry on Twitter. And Facebook is not great for everything. But I'm glad you find a balance. Do you find you have to give yourself some boundaries around this, though, to make it work?
I try not to share like super personal stuff. Like share enough so that people get the gist of what's going on. But I definitely don't share everything that's going on in my life still. Like there's a lot of things that go in my life that I don't share still. But I think things like that, especially at the moment, like I think sharing that, like, if you've had a bereavement in the family or something happens job wise or something like that, I think it is important to share so people are aware, of the situation you're in, and so on. So I try not to share too much, because I'm quite aware of, what's like, that there are bad people out there as well, and you probably shouldn't share everything. But I think certain things I'm happy to sort of share a little bit if I can.
It's good. Have you got anything that you're doing, like little side projects to keep you happy at the moment? What sort of fun things you got going on?
Actually, so I've been playing Animal Crossing a lot, which I don't know if that counts as a side project, but
it's an interest, right?
Yeah, it's technically a side project because you're building an island, so
it's good.
But apart from that, I've been doing a massive revamp of my website recently. So I've been having to, like I think I mentioned earlier, I've been having to remember how to code. That's taken up a fair amount of my time, which is quite nice, because I find like designing your own portfolio is quite a challenge as a designer, because you keep overthinking it and you keep like wanting to redo it over and over again. So I've had quite a lot of fun doing that. It's not finished yet, but it's sort of making good progress. And then I've started to think about, I don't know if you remember, but I used to have a blog quite a long time ago where I used to post some posts. Like, it wasn't a big blog, but I used to post a fair bit about design.
Right. Yeah.
So I've been starting to think about creating some content to maybe be able to create a blog again in sort of the next few months. So we'll see if I manage to get enough together for that. But yeah, that's been sort of my little side project.
Well, that's good though. You got some nice little goals to aim for, really, and they're not strict.
Yeah.
It just gives you a nice, right, by the end of the summer, I want
No.
to have my blog up and running or whatever it might be. So that's good.
Yeah.
Keeping your brain
Yeah,
ticking over
exactly.
and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think it is nice to have something on the side, but I'm not generally a big side project person. Like I do quite like to focus on my work and then try and have like time to myself outside of work as well. But things like that I try and sort of tick along in the background if I can.
It's a good balance, I think.
Mm.
I mean, you mentioned your gaming. Is there anything else you sort of do just for downtime to really ease your mental health down?
So yeah, mainly Animal Crossing,
It's good.
and baking,
Yeah.
cooking, things like that. And also, like I said, cycling. I've been doing a lot more indoor cycling since all of this, not so much outdoor. But normally, I would sort of go out on a cycle at a weekend or something like that. Not too far, just sort of for a nice distance.
Sure.
Yeah, mainly things like that. Normally I go to like exercise classes and stuff like that, which I find help a lot, because if you start to get to know people in your exercise class and things like that, I think it's quite a nice way to sort of be able to socialize after work and so on. And I've been doing a lot of Zoom calls with friends, doing quizzes and some random stuff like that, which has been quite fun, even though you can't see each other.
How are you finding that?
Um,
Because I've found it a bit difficult at times. You're thinking, I've had enough of Zoom calls this week. I don't want another social one. It's just time out now.
yeah,
How are you finding that?
I have found it a bit like, I feel like you go a bit square-eyed some days.
Yeah.
Like because like you, we have a lot of video calls. Like I find myself on video calls probably for 80-90% of the day when I'm working. So to have to go and do that after work as well is quite, like, it's quite taxing on the old eyes.
Yeah.
But I have found that it's quite nice as a way to obviously stay in touch with friends and not feel like you're sort of disconnected from people throughout all of this. I think we're quite lucky that we've got, access to that, and we're not in a time where we don't have, video calling and so on, because I imagine just being able to speak on the phone would make it a lot harder than it has been. But yeah, like you say,
Are your parents online as well? Are you able to video call them back in Essex at all?
yeah, I managed. Well, luckily I was there through most of lockdown, so until they
Yeah.
released the driving restrictions, so I didn't need to like video call my mum or anything, which was lovely. But now obviously I'm not with them anymore. I had to teach her how to do a WhatsApp video call, and my mum's not the most tech savvy of people. And she like picked it up and she saw that it said video call, but she still put it to her ear anyway. And I was like, Mum, why can I only see your ear?
Brilliant.
So yeah, it's been a bit of an adjustment, but yeah, I've managed to speak to her still on video.
That's good. At least you can keep in touch with a face-to-face call as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Well, I mean, I can't believe that's already been half an hour. That's gone
Crikey.
amazingly quick.
I can talk for too long. That's why.
You're talking to one of the world's worst. Is there anything you want to kind of impart to the audience and, like, how you're getting through, and any pro tips maybe?
Yeah, I think my main pro tip would be like what I touched on earlier, of not being hard on yourself. I think that's been the main thing. Like for me, like when we've had days of going through rubbish stuff with family and so on, like, and you have a day where you really just don't feel, like productive, I think just try not to be too hard on yourself and try to like ground yourself with what's going on. The fact that like you are working or going through whatever you're going through, like through a pandemic, you're not like working from home in a normal scenario. So I think like for me, that's like my main bit of wisdom, and try to do things that you enjoy as well as much as you can.
Ooh, I like that. Enjoy life as well. It's not all about work.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah,
try to use it as a time to sort of like relax, and like if you are with family, like you said, like appreciate the fact that you've got this extra time with your family, because soon enough, like whether it's in the next month or two or whether it does end up being longer than that, like we're going to end up going back to normal at some point, and everyone will be going, oh, I wish I could have spent more time with my family or speaking to my friends on calls and whatever. So I think trying to in some weird way appreciate that we have got some backwards like free time to appreciate the things around us at the moment, even though it might not seem like it sometimes.
Yeah, I know. I think family can get to you at some points, but they are there and they are our loved ones.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
good.
exactly.
I think, and just on your point about don't be too hard on yourself, I think just telling your people around you that you are having a bad day, so don't expect miracles. And people are relatable generally. There's probably a few people that are a little bit less relatable, but
Yeah, you always get a few.
Exactly. Working in tech, we know of a few. That's really good. And thanks for coming along and talking to us about this stuff.
That's all right.
If anyone wants to get in touch, how can they do that?
So I'm on Twitter, as you mentioned earlier. I'm a bit vocal about, well, when life was normal, I talked a lot about when trains were delayed and things like that. But now that's not the case.
And what Animal Crossing has.
Yeah, and animal. Oh yeah, I post a lot of Animal Crossing, and I do sometimes post some design stuff too. I'm trying to do more of that.
When it comes, it's fine.
Yeah, when it comes. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at Alex Brooke with a Y. So yeah. Cool. You can follow me on there if you want.
And your website that you're working on, what's the URL for that?
So that is alexi.me.
Alexi.me. Nice rhyme.
Yeah, every time I get asked for my email address in a shop, they think I'm giving them a fake email address when I say that's the end of it.
It's so behind the times. We've got these new TLDs now. Come on. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm revamping it at the moment, so it's not quite perfect yet, but
so watch this space. Yeah. I mean, it looks quite good. I was looking at it this weekend. I like it. I like what we got there.
I think the homepage is done.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming along, Alex. And hopefully we'll catch up again another time soon.
Yeah, sounds good. And thanks for having me as well.
Oh, take care.
You too.
Thank you to everyone for listening, and especially Alex for joining me for this episode of the Make Life Work podcast. As Alex mentioned, you can find her as Alex Brookey, that's AlexBrookey on the socials, or even visit her website at alexy, ALAEXY.me. You can find all the details about this podcast and other episodes on sidejobling.com/makelifework, or look for Make Life Work Pod on all the socials. We're also available in most of the popular podcast apps, so make sure you subscribe, give us a bit of a rating and a review so we know what you think of it. That's all from me this week. Join me next time when I'll be inviting along another guest to talk about balancing their work, life and side projects on the Make Life Work podcast.